Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to the race reaction for the 2020 Portuguese Grand Prix from Portimao in the Algarve. And well, it was definitely an interesting race. It wasn't a boring race by any stretch of the imagination. The start of the race was absolutely mental. It really was. I mean, those first two laps, it seemed as though every single car on the track was side by side with another car. And at times it was three wide on those first couple of laps. And I think it was because of the rain that had just started falling as the race had begun. And then after that we got, I wouldn't say a great race or a very good race. I'd say a decent to good race. There was a couple good battles out there. Raikkonen and Carlos Sainz is one I can think of. A couple crashes, of course. But I will say the one thing that was disappointing is the amount of easy DRS overtakes we had today. If we didn't have DRS at all, I think we would have had a great Grand Prix because a lot of those battles would have been, you know, great battles and it would have been very hard fought battles. But because of DRS and how effective it was down that pit straight, 90% of the overtakes were done well before they even thought about entering turn one. So yeah, not great in that sense, but definitely not a bad race. I'd say again, decent to good, say a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10, something like that. And I have to say this track as well, very good racetrack. Hopefully we do come back here because I think the drivers did enjoy this weekend at this track. But, you know, great to see you guys here as always. And hopefully you'll share your reactions to what happened today in Portugal. But before we get into the teams and how each team did and how their race went, let's first get into the results. And if you don't know the results of the Grand Prix in the Algarve, then here they are. So Lewis Hamilton won the Grand Prix and has become the most successful driver in terms of race victories of all time. He now has 92 race wins, breaking the record of Michael Schumacher of 91. That I don't think anyone, when Michael Schumacher set that record of 91, I don't think anyone thought that record would ever be broken. But it has, just, 14 years later. Fantastic drive. And for me, as we'll get into in a moment, Lewis Hamilton was the driver of the day, without a doubt for me. The way he drove today might have been one of the best drives he's had in the last couple of years. It was so dominant and just so great and really just showcased why he is one of the greatest of all time, at least. Even if you don't think he is the greatest, you have to admit he is one of the greatest of all time. Valtteri Bottas second. And then Max Verstappen in third place. Charles Leclerc fourth. What he's been doing with that Ferrari this weekend is nothing short of a miracle. And we'll get into that later on. Pierre Gasly P5. What a result for AlphaTauri. Carlos Sainz in sixth. Perez seventh. Ocon eighth. Ricciardo ninth. And Vettel in 10th place. And then finishing the race but not scoring any points, Kimi Raikkonen, Alex Albon, Lando Norris, George Russell, Antonio Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Grosjean, Latifi and Kvyat. And your only retirement, Lance Stroll, who really is struggling to get racing and any real momentum under his belt. And we'll get into why that is again later on. But first, we've got to get into Mercedes and just how they obliterated the field today. And they really did. At the start, though, it was very, let's say, harem-scarum. So Hamilton got away fine from Bottas. Bottas almost, and I think he actually did briefly lose the position. Second place to Max Verstappen and got it back again at turn 3, I believe. And then Verstappen had his incident, which we'll get into in a minute. And then, because of the very bad, and it's not just on the mediums, it's on the softs and the hard tyre as well. The tyre warm-up around this track this weekend, I think because of the new surface and the cold temperatures, and we haven't raced it before, it was very hard to warm the tyres up when, you know, you started the race or started a new stint, as we saw during the Grand Prix. And because Lewis Hamilton was struggling a bit more than Valtteri Bottas, Bottas got past Lewis Hamilton on lap 1 just 3 or 4 corners later with a great down the inside move before they went into the final sector. Then Lewis Hamilton lost a position to Carlos Sainz, who made an amazing start. And because he was on the soft tyre and those tyres fire up quicker, that's why he was flying along and eventually got into the lead and led the race for, was it 5 laps or 4 laps? Something like that. So that was again, bit of a scary start, but once the rain had cleared and the Mercs had got their tyres fired up, they both passed Carlos Sainz and were flying off into the distance and looking very, very comfortable. And then, slowly but surely, Lewis Hamilton got up to the back of Valtteri Bottas, because Bottas, as we'll get into, once we stop, I say, going through the race, how it went for Mercedes, I'll get into why Valtteri just let Lewis Hamilton really have the position and have the win. Got up to the back of Valtteri Bottas, passed him quite easily, and after that, Lewis Hamilton pounded Bottas into the dirt and completely destroyed Valtteri Bottas today. And went on to win the race. Bottas finished in second, and Hamilton ended up winning the race by about a pit stop ahead. And that's why I said that today's performance by Lewis Hamilton has to be one of his best. You know, the start of the race, the first couple laps were quite shocking for Lewis Hamilton. Not in terms of he drove poorly. It was just a bad start, you know, going from first down to third, and then he was under pressure from Max Verstappen briefly as he was stuck behind Carlos Sainz. It just wasn't looking good for Lewis Hamilton. But once he got past Carlos Sainz for second, then he settled down, got into a pattern, and from then on, as I said, obliterated not only the rest of the opposition, but his teammate as well. He said, and I think honestly he was trolling Bottas. And I think he's trolled him all weekend, really. Because if you look at qualifying, for example, all through practice and Q1 and Q2, Valtteri looked like he was going to get pole position. Then Lewis Hamilton bangs in a great lap at the end and gets pole. Because, you know, great drivers like him, they can do that without even having to think about it. They can just flick the switch on and, you know, get pole by that 1/10 of a second that they need, and which he needed and which he got. And then in the race today, you know, once he settled down after he passed Carlos Sainz, most drivers probably would have finished behind Valtteri Bottas in second place, but Lewis Hamilton, you know, looked after his tyres, was trying to get in, and again, got into his pattern, setting some good lap times, and then just went after Valtteri Bottas, got straight up to the back of him, got DRS, passed him easily down to turn 1, and then after that, it was really no contest whatsoever. But for Valtteri Bottas, he keeps doing this, Bottas. He keeps being given a chance to beat Hamilton and then fails to take it. A great example of this is also Mugello, where he qualified second, got the lead on the first lap, and then on the restart of the race, lost the lead. And then, you know, when they had the third restart, or the second restart, but, you know, the third start on the grid, had a great chance to take the lead off of Lewis Hamilton, but failed to take it. You know, just, again, when Valtteri is given the chance, he just can't take it. And that's the difference between a good driver and a great driver like Lewis Hamilton. When they are given a chance to get a position, to get the result, they take it. Valtteri just doesn't take it often enough. I mean, you look at the Nürburgring as well. He got pole with a great lap, got back in front of Lewis Hamilton at the start, was looking comfortable, and then he threw it all away. And yes, the car problem wasn't helping for him, but if he didn't lock up like he did, and he did finish the race, then he probably would have been in a great position to win that Grand Prix. And today, he, you know, doesn't have that great of a start, gets past Verstappen at turn 3, then passes Hamilton a few corners later, and you're thinking, right, and especially when or in the way he pulled away from Lewis Hamilton the first few laps, you're thinking, right, this is Valtteri's chance. He's been great all weekend, been very quick. This is his chance to really, show Lewis Hamilton that he can fight him and that he can compete. Because if you look at Valtteri's, wins in Russia, that was obviously helped by Hamilton having a penalty. I don't think Bottas would have won that race if Hamilton didn't have the penalty. You look at the first Grand Prix in Austria. I know Hamilton kind of caused his own issue there, but it wasn't a completely smooth Grand Prix there either for Lewis Hamilton. Valtteri this season has not genuinely, in a race, beaten Lewis Hamilton in a proper head-to-head. And, another example of him beating Hamilton, but being kind of, I won't say lucky to do so, but not beating him on genuine pace was also the Italian Grand Prix, where Hamilton, of course, had that penalty, had to go to the back, and then came through the field and finished behind him. Point is, today was a great chance for Valtteri to show he could beat Lewis Hamilton in a proper head-to-head fight. And what does he do? Something that he has been guilty of doing for years, because this is just a trait of how Valtteri, I guess, drives. He cannot, to save his life, look after tyres. Because that's why he lost the lead to Hamilton. Because he pushed too hard, too soon. And that's what allowed Lewis Hamilton to get up to the back of him, pass him, and then pull away from him relentlessly. And then build that gap. And you can't say Valtteri wasn't given a great chance to win today. Again, had the lead, had a couple second lead on Lewis Hamilton. All he had to do really is look after the tyres, look after the car until the first pit stop. And then, if you're really going to push then at the pit stops to make sure you maintain your gap over Lewis Hamilton. But I just think today he, again, pushed too hard too soon. Lewis looked after his tyres and then struck when Valtteri's tyres had clearly gone away from him. And I think today is just a clear indication that Valtteri Bottas is never going to compete for a world championship. He will have days where he wins races and, makes great overtakes and gets great pole positions. And he's had that this year. He's had great qualifying pace, and we've never denied that. Valtteri in qualifying is very, very quick. But in the race, in a head-to-head fight, there is simply no contest. It's going to be Lewis Hamilton winning 99% of the time. And I have to say again, congratulations to Lewis Hamilton for breaking the record for most race wins. I've always thought Lewis was a great driver and had the potential to be the greatest of all time. And at the moment, he's definitely right up there in that conversation for greatest of all time. But I never thought anyone would break the record for most race wins. I thought it would probably just about hang on. But he's gone and done it. Absolutely fantastic. And the way he drove today, he deserved to break that record. What a drive. What a drive. Destroyed everyone, even his teammate. And I think what makes his drive, for me, driver of the day worthy, is that it's not like he led from the, lap 1 to lap 66. Dropped down to third, had a difficult start, and then marched his way back into the lead and obliterated his teammate. That's just, another level compared to anyone else. But there you go. Those are, that is the Silver Arrows. Next up is Red Bull. But before we go on to Red Bull, let me just hear from you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say in terms of what did you think of Mercedes today, and what did you think of just Lewis Hamilton's drive, and also how Valtteri Bottas, threw away the race, I guess you could say. Because I really did think today Valtteri threw away the race. Again, led rather comfortably, and then just let Lewis, come at him, pass him easily, and destroy him. Let me read some comments here quickly. Hello to everyone from the chat. Spider Monkey, Eugene Kelly, Francisco, Ronan Brady, Brooksfoot. Matt Stanek, Valtteri's racecraft has taken a massive dive, or he must be getting lost in his car setup, leaning more towards qualifying. He has no race pace. He's always struggled for race pace. He has always struggled. If you look at his time at Mercedes, even at Williams, his best part of the weekend tends to be in qualifying. And then the race either is, he either finishes in the position he qualifies in, or he drops to a lower position. And the only time he really finishes higher than his qualifying position is either if he has an amazing drive, which is rare from him, or if someone ahead of him on the grid in the race goes on to retire or have some kind of issue. That's just the way Valtteri Bottas is. The only recent time I can think where Valtteri has had, has climbed up from his grid position and had a great race was Suzuka last year, where that was probably his best drive in Formula One. The way he just leapt off the line, got into the lead, and was even, massively quicker than his teammate. And even the man who was on pole position that day, Sebastian Vettel. I have to say, though, considering that was only a year ago, it feels a lot longer considering it was a Ferrari front row. It honestly feels a lot longer than that. But, yeah, that's just the way Valtteri Bottas is. If he's going to win a race, he has to get pole position. If he doesn't get pole position and doesn't beat Lewis at the start, he's not going to win the race. Unless Lewis has a problem. That right there is the problem with Valtteri Bottas. So either he improves his race pace to the point where he can still fight for the win, even if he hasn't got pole or hasn't took the lead into turn 1 or in the first lap, or he has to make his qualifying performances so incredibly good that he ends up taking pole position 70% of the time. So then, some of the time where he gets a good enough start to lead on the first lap, he can go on and win the Grand Prix. But look at the Nürburgring. Held on for the lead on the first lap. Then made a mistake and gave Lewis Hamilton the lead. So even that sometimes is not reliable for him. Right, let me find a couple more if I can. A couple more comments. Ronan Brady saying, also, I agree. Hamilton was playing games with him. I was thinking the same yesterday. Even the pundits on Sky F1 were saying it, that Lewis was sandbagging through practice. And Lewis came out and said, oh, no, I wasn't sandbagging. And I think, to be honest, I don't think it's him sandbagging. I think it's just, maybe it's him working more on his race setup more than Valtteri does, and then maybe that's why Valtteri is so bad in the races, because he works a lot on the single lap. Maybe that's it, but this is the thing with Lewis Hamilton. He's so good. He can be miles off the pace in practice, and then once he gets to Q3, all he has to do is pull out 2 great laps, or even 1 great lap, and gets pole, like he did yesterday. And then today was at his brilliant best yet again. Right, let me find one final comment, then we'll get on to Red Bull. Ben McCarthy, great to see you here. He says, Bottas can beat a past Prime Massa, but this just enforces the idea of how truly outstanding Hamilton is. He can obliterate very good drivers. Lewis is beyond very good. Yeah, he's definitely better than very good. He's a great driver. And I think with Valtteri Bottas, I think people need to realise that, again, he is in the exact same role that Rubens Barrichello was with Michael Schumacher. He is the number 2 driver. And if you look at Barrichello back in the day, there were days in 2003 or 2002 or 2004 where Barrichello was able to beat Michael Schumacher in a qualifying session or win a Grand Prix. But 90% of the time, Michael Schumacher, in the same way Lewis Hamilton does, was on top form and got the race win or the pole position. It's the same thing. And I think if Lewis Hamilton, for example, was to retire at the end of this season, I don't think he will, by the way, retire at the end of this season, even though he hasn't signed a new contract yet. If Lewis was to leave and you put in, say, Russell alongside Bottas, Russell, who is a very good driver, but I don't think is at Lewis Hamilton's level at all. I think people would then see how good Valtteri Bottas is. Because, I mean, look at qualifying. How many times this season has Valtteri Bottas either beat Lewis Hamilton in qualifying, or when he hasn't beat Hamilton in qualifying, he's been very close to beating him and pushed him to, or pushed Hamilton, to his absolute limit. I mean, look at yesterday. Hamilton only got pole position by, was it a 10th of a second? And then at the Nürburgring, Bottas beat Hamilton by a quarter of a second. And then you look at, even in Hungary, where Lewis Hamilton was on another planet, even in qualifying, Valtteri was less than a 10th of a second away from pole. I think people underestimate how good Valtteri Bottas is. When we criticise Valtteri, I think it's more so we just want him to be Nico Rosberg. We want him to compete with Lewis Hamilton. We want him to try and actually have a championship fight with Lewis Hamilton, but he isn't that good. He's good. Valtteri is a very good driver, and I think, again, if you took Lewis Hamilton out of that team, you would really see that Valtteri is a very, very good driver. He's not a great driver, but he is a very good driver and very quick. Very reminiscent, honestly, I think, when it comes to qualifying, of Mika Häkkinen. And they're also similar drivers, Bottas and Häkkinen. Häkkinen back in the day, in qualifying, was out of this world. He was not quite at the Ayrton Senna level, but he was very close. He was blisteringly quick. Bottas, I wouldn't say is as good as Häkkinen for that, but he's in that kind of area. And I think, again, if you took Hamilton out of that team and put Bottas alongside, say, Sebastian Vettel in this car, I'm not saying Bottas would win that fight, because I don't think he would. But I think people would be very surprised as to how good Valtteri actually is, because he's still, especially in qualifying, pushing Lewis Hamilton very, very hard. Anyway, I think we've said enough about this team. Obviously, great team and another 1-2 finish. Let's get on to Red Bull Racing. Max Verstappen had, I guess, the race that he was always going to have, a third place. I predicted it in the Discord server earlier on. By the way, if you're not a part of that server, make sure to be a part of it, because in the race, you can, catch up with the comments I'm making about the race and all of that, and what other people are saying, and join the community over there. Link below in the description. But, yeah, because he was starting Max on the soft compound compared to the mediums that Lewis and Valtteri are on, he was never going to beat them, because that soft tyre was awful. Absolutely terrible. And I don't really know why Red Bull did not try to get Max to qualify on that tyre, because the soft tyre was never going to be good around here. And the reason it was never going to be good is because look at the track layout. Lots of fast corners. Long fast corners, especially in the final sector. Because of that, that's going to mean that the softer the tyre on, if you're on the softest compound, you're going to destroy them pretty quickly. And we saw that throughout the Grand Prix today, especially in the first 10 to 15 laps, with the drivers who started on that compound, which was, I don't think it was half of the grid, but it was a quarter, maybe a third of the grid start on that tyre, and a lot of them were struggling, except for, say, Gasly. Don't know if you can say Kimi Räikkönen struggled, or didn't struggle, because he did fall back quite big time after his great start, but as I was saying, because he was starting on that compound, there was no real chance that Max Verstappen was going to beat the two Mercs today. So he did the best he could. We'll get into later his contact with Sergio Perez on the first lap, which, I mean, when I do my review for this Grand Prix during next week, I'll upload that probably Thursday or Friday time. I'll showcase why it was, I think, a racing incident, honestly, that crash. But yeah, I just don't think there's anything really Verstappen or Perez, you know, could have done in that incident. Perez, maybe he could have gone a bit wider to avoid the crash, but then he'd have to go off track. And then Verstappen, I think the only way he avoids Perez is if he just completely lifts off and lets Perez through, which, of course, when you're racing, you're not going to do that. And he doesn't have to do that. And he shouldn't have to do that. So, yeah, I think, honestly, that was a bit of a racing incident. But, yeah, Max did the best he could today. The Red Bull just isn't on the same planet as that Mercedes. I mean, there was a point in the race where that Mercedes was still faster than the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, even though Max had pitted for fresh medium tyres when Lewis Hamilton was on older medium tyres. Which is why I say that this Red Bull is not even on the same planet as that car. Yeah, that was Max Verstappen's race. And then Alex Albon. What an awful race. Absolutely shit. It really was. Qualifying... His qualifying position wasn't good, but I actually thought his pace in qualifying was to be expected. He was about half a second off of Max Verstappen. That is, I'd say, the maximum lap time difference between them two you can tolerate is half a second. So I didn't think the pace he had in qualifying was that bad. It was to be expected. But in the race, I mean, yeah, poor start because of the conditions, and then went nowhere, then pitted for fresh tyres, was fighting his way through the field, then pitted again for soft tyres, and he just went nowhere today. He didn't do anything. He didn't progress through the field after that start. He just went absolutely nowhere. Yeah. I mean, what is there to say about Albon anymore? I think you have to say that he's done at Red Bull. I don't see Alex Albon in that car next year. And I think if he is in that car, then Red Bull are being extremely kind to Alex Albon because he's not good enough. He's simply not good enough. And I think, honestly, considering the latest speculation of who is going to be in what seat for next year, I don't see Alex Albon on the grid for 2021 at all. Because if he does this again next weekend at Imola, then what reason do Red Bull have to keep him in that car? They don't have one. Because, yes, not all of the reasons why he's so slow, or not so slow but been so poor, are all his fault. There's other factors, such as he hasn't had the same development parts put on his car at the same time as Max Verstappen. That is true. Hasn't always had the same help on tyre strategy compared to Max Verstappen. He could, though, help that by qualifying better. But, again, I've said this for the last couple races. It's getting to that point that it got to with Pierre Gasly. And also today, if you didn't know, Albon was lapped by his teammate Max Verstappen. And like it got in the last 2-3 races with Gasly when he was at Red Bull, again, I've said this time and time again, since I came back to doing videos, it's now become basically impossible to defend Alex Albon anymore. Now, yes, I agree that if you get rid of Albon and you put in Hülkenberg or Perez or Gasly or Kvyat or, you know, that doesn't mean that that driver in that seat is going to automatically be right up there with Max Verstappen. But I don't think you can look at Albon now, considering the circumstances of what's happened this year. I don't think you can look at Alex Albon and say that he has done the best he could have with what he has. That Red Bull car, we know, it's not a good car, or not good enough. Not as good as it should be. I think it's a better way of putting it. It's not a good car. It's a midfield car, let's be honest. The only reason Max Verstappen gets podiums in that car is because it's, let's say, a front-running midfield car. I wouldn't say it's a top car, a front-running car. The only front-running car on the grid is the Mercedes car. That's the only front-running car in the field. This Red Bull is upper midfield in terms of its pace compared to everyone else. And again, the only reason, as I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, that Red Bull are second and 100 points clear of Racing Point in the constructors is because of Max Verstappen. Not because of Honda or Adrian Newey's design of this new Red Bull or their team principal Christian Horner or Helmut Marko or Alex Albon. It is because of Max Verstappen. That's why Red Bull are so keen to hold on to Max Verstappen, because they know that if they give him a car that is remotely close to winning Grand Prix, Max Verstappen will win Grand Prix. I mean, again, just look at this season. This Red Bull car has rarely been separated clearly from the midfield pack of McLaren, Renault, Racing Point, AlphaTauri. It's rarely been separated clearly from that pack. And yeah, I think Albon, going back to Albon, I think Albon is absolutely done at Red Bull, and I think is done in Formula One. I don't see Albon on the grid next year because I don't see Red Bull keeping him. I don't think he'll go back in the AlphaTauri because I think they're going to put, is it Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri alongside Gasly, meaning Kvyat will be out of Formula 1, which is sad because I think Daniel's actually had a decent year, but that's the way it is. And then he's not going to go to Williams because Williams, if you believe the rumours at the moment, seem to be very keen on money, and Alex doesn't have that, nor is he as talented as the drivers competing for one of those seats. Maybe he'll go to Haas F1. I don't think he will, because I think Haas F1 have plenty of other options, such as Mick Schumacher, Callum Ilott, Nikita Mazepin, Nico Hulkenberg, Sergio Perez. Those are better options than Alex Albon. So, I mean, it's sad because he's a nice guy, but you know what they say about nice guys, they always finish last. So, I think Albon honestly is done. I hope he can pull out some great results before the season is over to try and save his career, but I think honestly his career is done in Formula 1. But guys, before we get on to the next team, let me know in the chat what you think about Red Bull today, and what did you think of Alex Albon in terms of his result today, but also his, I guess, Formula 1 future, because I don't see him having one at all. I think he's done. So, let me have a look quick at the chat. Francisco, what was Albon doing today? Albon just has no confidence. I don't think it's just confidence in the car. I think it's also he's lost confidence in his own ability. And I think that's recently come from that race at the Nürburgring. But you have to say that was his fault, what he did at the Nürburgring. Locking his tyres constantly. Crashing into Daniel Kvyat. He has only himself to blame, I'm afraid. Couldn't get past a hobby driver, says Crystal Racing. I'm guessing you're talking about Kimi Räikkönen there. We'll get on to him soon. He was great today, Kimi. He really was. Another great performance by him. Hello to Nib. Great to see you, mate, in the chat. Find some other comments here. Will F1 pointing out Gasly is only 1 point behind Albon in the championship. Now, as I've been saying, Max is looking at Red Bull, or making that Red Bull look a lot better than it is. I think no one can really deny that. But it's definitely better than the AlphaTauri. I don't think anyone would really debate that. And I think with Albon, again, you can't really defend him because of that, you know, only being a point ahead. Find a couple more comments. Get on to our favourite team. We all know who that is. Ronan Brady says, Shazza, it's not that bad, the car. I think you're really overestimating how good that car is. It's not that good of a car. It really isn't. When you watch it, it's not the Red Bull car we've been used to in the last 2 or 3 years, where it's been very stable and you can absolutely drive the socks off of it. Even sorry, even last year, that Red Bull car, you could really, you know, throw it about and it would really stick to the track. This season, it doesn't. It's very unstable in certain places, namely the rear end. And yeah, it's not a good car. It's not a bad car compared to the rest of the field, but it's not good compared to where it should be. That Red Bull car should be in the ballpark of where the Mercedes is. It shouldn't be, I'm not saying it should be, you know, faster than the Mercedes car, but it shouldn't be, you know, as far off as it is at all. It really shouldn't be. Let me find a couple more comments about Red Bull. Ronan Brady follows that comment up by saying the Red Bull car is much better than you're making out. Nah, it's not. I think either you're overestimating the Red Bull car or you're underestimating Max Verstappen's ability. Max is making that car look really good because that car really hasn't got an area of it where you can say it's, you know, very good in. It's not a bad car. It's just not very stand out-ish, if you know what I mean. Doesn't really stand out in any particular area. It's not super grippy on the rear end. Doesn't have a great front end. They don't have that much power compared to, say, the Renault-powered teams or the Mercedes-powered teams. It's just I guess compared to where it should be, it's a bang average, you know, F1 car. Again, compared to where they should be, and compared to, well, not compared to, but, you know, if you look at their resources and finances, they shouldn't be, you know, having Max only a 10th or 2 ahead of midfield cars in qualifying and having Albon continuously in the midfield all the time. That's why I say that Alex, this season, even though he hasn't been good, he hasn't been helped by the pace of the car, the unpredictability of the car in terms of its handling, but also just the way the team has operated towards him. I'll read this final one out from Nib, which is, it's so ominous, honestly. And it's true, by the way. This is a confirmed fact. Red Bull car has gotten better. It has got better. Not massively, but it's got better. But he makes the point, and it is true, and Mercedes announced this earlier this week, Mercedes have stopped developing their car for 2020. That's how good they are. That they don't even have to put new parts on it. They can just release the car, put a couple extra parts on it, and just leave it. Because it's that good. It doesn't need extra parts. It's, you know, it's just such a great car. And I remember, you know, looking at onboard clips of this Mercedes back in Hungary, and I still think it to this day. If you look at the grip of that car, it is the greatest Formula 1 car I've ever seen. There is not one area of that car that is not strong. The front end is perfect. The rear end is perfect. You know, they've got the most power now. And, you know, they don't wear their tyres out. I mean, is there an area of that car that's a weak spot? Maybe you can say, oh, at certain races where it's a bit hotter. But, you know, we're in October, November, December now. So that's gone. Yeah. Just how can you compete with Mercedes? Honestly, I don't see how you can. That's why I was saying a moment ago with Red Bull that I don't expect them to have the best car because I just don't think in this current formula it's possible. But you would expect Red Bull to have a car that's in the ballpark of where Mercedes are. But I don't think you can deny that Mercedes do have the best car on the grid. And I think probably the best car of all time. Just go and look at that onboard lap in Hungary. It is literally perfection. That lap from Lewis Hamilton. Anyway, on to our favourite circus act, Ferrari. But today, and this weekend really, there was no, you know, spins. I know plenty of Ferrari fans have got used to that by now, the spinning. There was no plan C. There was no plan D. There was no plan E even. They had, except really for what they did with Sebastian Vettel in qualifying, which honestly I felt was terrible, they had a pretty good weekend. It wasn't because of the car being a bit better or the car being good. It was really because this man on screen, Charles Leclerc, drove the socks off that Ferrari. Qualifying in 4th place, only, was it half a second off of pole position, I think? I mean, how he did that, I don't know. I honestly don't know, because that Ferrari car is not that good. It really isn't. So, great performance in qualifying. And also, not just a great performance in Q3, but in Q2 to qualify and be fast enough to get into the top 10 on medium tyres, because that is what made his race today. If he started the race today on soft tyres, he probably would have ended up around Ocon and Ricciardo in the pack, because those soft tyres would have degraded so quickly and he would have fell back. As we've seen with Ferrari this year, when they start on the softest compound, they tend to self-destruct and, you know, just disappear. But because Leclerc was so quick in Q2, he was able to get in on medium tyres, and once after the start where he lost a couple of positions because he was on the medium tyres and he was struggling for warm-up on those tyres, once he got going, got past Kimi Räikkönen and then the two McLarens, and actually got quite close to Max Verstappen before Max made his pit stop, he was comfortably P4. And honestly, I don't even understand how Leclerc's done this. Part of me says Charles Leclerc is just that good, and I think Leclerc is actually a bit underrated at the moment. I think Leclerc is driving at a amazing level right now, and he has been for the last 2 or 3 races to get the finishes that he has out of that Ferrari car. But is he being helped by the fact that Ferrari are focusing all, say, development and support on him rather than the man on screen right now, Sebastian Vettel? I don't really know. I think most of it is Charles Leclerc being just that good. But it's hard to say, you know, what all the factors are for Charles Leclerc to be just that quick compared to his teammate. I mean, Leclerc was, over half a minute ahead of Vettel by the end of the race, and was way quicker in qualifying. I don't quite understand why he was that quick, but I definitely think it's not because Ferrari have made a ton of progress. I don't believe that for a second. I think Charles Leclerc is doing essentially what Max Verstappen is doing. He's making the car look a lot better than it actually is, because Charles Leclerc is a very, very good racing driver, and his pace is great. It really is. So I think that's why he was so quick. I don't think it's because Ferrari have really improved. I think, you can really look at the last Grand Prix in the Nürburgring as an example of that. Leclerc qualifying up in 4th place, but started on the soft and then fell back and ended up, racing with AlphaTauri and Haas and Alfa Romeo. So I think it is definitely Leclerc just putting in an amazing performance. 2 races in a row, really, especially in qualifying, to be as quick as he was. For Sebastian Vettel, though, I mean, we know, he's leaving and he's not happy with the team and the relationship has completely fallen apart. We get that. But in qualifying, after that first run, because they tried to get both Ferraris, the team, they tried to get both cars into Q3 on the medium tyre. That worked with Charles Leclerc because Charles Leclerc was so quick. But after that first run, it was pretty obvious that Sebastian Vettel was not going to get into the top 10 on a set of medium compound tyres. Now, yes, the soft compound tyre was not a good race tyre for the Grand Prix, except for the first 3 or 4 laps when it was very cold and raining a bit. But why did they not put on a set of soft compound tyres for Vettel? I don't get it. Yes, it will harm his race in terms of he'll have to pit a lot earlier. I get that. I really do. But surely starting, say, 8th or 9th is better than starting 15th. Surely that's better than starting on mediums and starting almost at the back of the grid. I don't get why they did that. It made no sense. They should just put a soft compound tyre on and let him try to get into the top 10, because at the end of the day, starting, again, 8th, 9th or 10th is better than starting in 15th place. But this is Ferrari. We shouldn't even be surprised anymore. But in the race, I thought Sebastian drove really well. Did the best he could. Looked after his tyres well. Couple good overtakes. Did the best he could with what is clearly an awful racing car. So I can't really complain about him. And I don't think this season, except for maybe at the start of the season, you can't really complain about his performances. He's not really in the last... I mean, I know he spun at the Nürburgring, but that wasn't completely his fault. It was kind of to do with the him, changing direction so quickly down to turn 1 at the Nürburgring. But really, in the last 3 or 4 races, he hasn't really put a foot wrong. He's just being hampered massively by the awful car that is that car. So, can't really complain about that. But Leclerc is saving Ferrari's season from getting even worse, because if he wasn't as good as he was today, or 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks before that, AlphaTauri would have been ahead of them in the constructors. And that's the only reason Ferrari are not 7th in the constructors, is because of Charles Leclerc. Because I think AlphaTauri, to be honest, deserve it. They've been better this season. They've got a better car, I think. So, yeah, Charles Leclerc. I mean, if they're going to build the team around him, then they should, because he's saving their bacon big time from making the season go even worse than what it's been. But yeah, for Ferrari, compared to what I was expecting, and I think what we were all expecting, I think you'd have to say a good result. 13 points. Yeah, considering how bad their season has been, I think you've got to say good result, but obviously still not what they want. Let me take a look quickly at the chat to see what you guys have to say about Ferrari. Have a quick look. Deb getting the scraps. Yeah, maybe you could say that. I mean, if Stroll and Norris had not had their little contact, then maybe Vettel would not have scored a point. But I think he deserves it for still, putting up with what is, or what has been his season. Because even though he hasn't driven great this season, he has made a couple mistakes this season, and definitely in the last couple years has been on the way down rather than on the way up. And I have criticised him, rightfully so, for mistakes that were definitely his fault. But you cannot deny this season that his team are really dealing with this breakup really bad. Sebastian, again, he hasn't succeeded at Ferrari, I don't think, because the aim was always to win a championship, and that's not happened. But just the way they're treating him is just not good. Ever since they announced he was leaving, it's the relationship has just been terrible between the two. Find a couple more comments before we get on to McLaren. I think is the next team. Yeah. Will F1 says it was only really the two Silverstone races where Vettel was really struggling. His pace was still decent in Austria. Yeah, in Austria it was decent, but still, Hungary, he was good. He was very good there. And then, the two Silverstone races, he was terrible. In terms of his speed, I'm not saying in terms of his driving, because again, he's not being helped by the team in terms of support, technically, and just morale-wise, he's not being helped in that way. But his pace was terrible in the two Silverstone races. At the Spanish Grand Prix, I think that's just how quick the car was, and I don't think Leclerc was really doing that much better. Bar Monza, the team really couldn't do any better than what they did, and it was still really, really shit. Mugello, he was bad. Russia, of course, he crashed. He's just had a really poor season, but I don't think it's all down to him. He's definitely contributing to it because he's definitely not mentally in the right frame of mind to be, the Sebastian Vettel that we saw 2 or 3 years ago. But yeah, I think I've said enough about Sebastian. Let me just quickly get into one final comment about Ferrari. And then get to McLaren. Crystal Racing saying, at least Ferrari SF1000 looks a bit better. I'm guessing you're saying compared to the other Ferraris that have been bad, say like the 2014 one. I'm not sure. But anyway, let's move on from them and go to McLaren, who had an amazing start to the Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz was actually leading for more than one lap. It was, 4 or 5 laps in the lead, and he was looking pretty good once the two Mercs got past him to possibly, and Verstappen as well, looking good to possibly finish in the top 5. But because he started on that compound tyre you're seeing right there, even though this is Lando's car, because he started on that compound, it hampered his race. It helped him in the start, but it hampered him later on compared to Charles Leclerc. Not really to anyone else in the mediums, but also, I don't know why, and we'll get onto this later with Pierre Gasly. I don't know why Gasly was able to hang on and really perform so well on those soft tyres compared to Sainz, Norris, Ricciardo. I don't get it. The AlphaTauri is good at looking after his tyres, but I didn't think it was that good compared to, say, McLaren or Renault. It was a bit weird, that. But yeah, because he started on that compound, he was never really going to progress in that first stint. So once he came in for medium tyres, he then had to slowly but surely get through the field, getting past Raikkonen and, other midfield drivers who were in his way, and then getting past, Daniel Ricciardo, and then almost getting past Gasly. Then once Gasly pulled away from him and got past Perez, Carlos Sainz centered in on Sergio Perez on I think it was the final lap he overtook him on, or the penultimate lap, one of the two. A great move, round the outside, was helped of course by DRS, but, very good move. Round the outside, and a very important result, 6th place for Carlos Sainz, because now that McLaren have dropped behind Racing Point recently in the constructors, they've got to slowly but surely, hack away at the lead that Racing Point have got. And it's only 2 points, but, as long as they can outscore Racing Point and Renault, then, they can go and get third in the constructors. Talking about Ferrari, though, because of Charles Leclerc's great results in the last couple of races, Ferrari are not too far behind in that fight now. They're only 35 points behind, something like that, or maybe slightly less than that. So they're maybe hovering on the outside of that, but yeah, McLaren, as long as they can and even if it's by a couple points a race, outscore Racing Point and Renault by, again, a couple points a race, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter how they get the results, as long as they finish third in the constructors, that is all that matters. For Lando Norris, I feel sorry for Lando today because he didn't drive bad at all. I thought he drove well. Problem is, Lance Stroll, and I'll get onto it later on when we show the actual picture of the crash, but Lance Stroll really did drive poor today, and in that particular incident, Lance Stroll was absolutely at fault. Nothing Lando could do. He, defended his line, and then Lance came across on him and did what he did. Just poor driving from Lance Stroll, but Lando was looking pretty good up to that point, looking like he was probably going to finish, P7, P8, and of course that would have helped in their fight against Racing Point and Renault if Lando had finished in the top 10, along with Carlos Sainz. So it was a good day today for McLaren, but it could have been better, but it's not their fault this time. It's because of someone else. That's someone else being Lance Stroll in the Racing Point. But they've scored the most points today out of them, Racing Point, and Renault. That's all that matters. And that's all that's going to matter in the final 5 races at Imola, Turkey, Bahrain for those 2 races there, and of course in Abu Dhabi as well. That's all that matters for them. They don't have to be, on the 2nd row or even on the 3rd row. As long as they outscore those teams and get 3rd, that's all that matters. And I hope they do get it, because I think McLaren, considering they've not really ever had, maybe except for a couple races, they've never really had the best car in the midfield in a particular weekend, but have always managed to score big points when it matters. I honestly hope they do get 3rd in the constructors, because I think they deserve it, honestly, the most out of Racing Point and Renault and themselves. Racing Point, I think, they've been very quick this season, of course, but I think they've thrown away lots of chances to be comfortably, honestly, in 3rd place. And for Renault, even though they've been quick as of late, they started the season way too slow. And I think McLaren have been consistently the best team out of those 3. So I would like to see McLaren finish in 3rd. And I think, honestly, again, they do deserve it. And I hope they do get it. Talking of Renault, though, let's get on to them now. Renault this weekend just weren't quick. Not as quick, certainly, as they were at the Nürburgring or Russia or Mugello or Monza or Spa, because this track is a bit too twisty and turny for their car's liking. Once we get to a track that's a bit more, straight lines, such as Bahrain and the second Bahrain race, which is basically an oval race, Renault will be very quick and will be absolutely fine. But around this circuit where grip is very important, they were never going to be, as good as they were 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks before that, or, a month before that. at the real power tracks on the calendar. So, not a real surprise as to what happened. Daniel Ricciardo did the best he could. I mean, of course, in qualifying, made a big mistake going off and damaging his rear wing, which, even though he got into Q3, meant he couldn't get out to do a final run. Because if he could get out to do a final run, he probably could have got into, say, 7th or 8th place. That would have helped his Grand Prix quite a lot if he did actually do a lap in Q3. But he didn't. Started P10, had a good start, but then fell back because he was on the soft tyres, which really hurt him. Then he went onto the mediums, went very long, looked after his tyres very well to still be in that fight with Sainz and Gasly and Perez and his teammate. But Ricciardo's race was really hampered by his qualifying. If he qualified, again, P7, P8, he probably would have been in that fight with Sainz and Perez at the end. But because he started P10, that's the way it worked out. I've got to say, though, for as much criticism as I've given him in the last couple races, Esteban Ocon was very, very good today. Of course, he was helped by starting P11 and on the tyres he wanted to, which were always going to be the medium compound tyres. And his stint, that first stint he did, which was, 51, 52 laps on the mediums? What a mega stint that was. And his pace was really good as well on that compound. And he was definitely today one of the drivers of the day. And then dropped back into 8th place. Came out on the soft tyre. A shame he couldn't get after anyone else, Sainz or Perez, because he was definitely, after what he did in that first stint, he looked like he was probably going to be finishing in 6th place on, a lot fresher tyres and all that. And he did get quite close to Perez at the end, but he couldn't really get after him on those soft tyres that, as I've said, didn't work today or really all weekend. But yeah, very good drive from Ocon. I'd actually say more than very good. I'd probably say great drive. Because that first stint, to do that many laps on that compound and be as consistently quick as he was and not fall off the cliff, that's a great drive. But I think this is the first race in a while that Renault have not really scored or outscored Racing Point and McLaren for quite a few races now. And that'll be a slight worry because the next couple circuits we're going to aren't exactly power tracks. I wouldn't really say Imola is a power track. You do need a very well-balanced car around there. Renault don't have, I think, as good of a balanced car as McLaren and Racing Point do. And also at Turkey, you need a very well-balanced car there as well. So I think Renault, honestly, what they've got to do in the next couple tracks, or races rather, Imola and Turkey, is try and get the best result they can and soften the blow that they're going to suffer against Racing Point and McLaren, who I think will be faster around those tracks. And then once you get to the 2 Bahrain races, where Renault should have the best midfield car, that's when they've got to strike if they're going to finish 3rd in the Constructors. But if we get to Bahrain and they've lost a few points compared to those 2 teams, that might cost them 3rd. But also, let's say they are still within 10-15 points of 3rd place when we get to Bahrain. If they do not strike in those 2 Bahrain races and get, say a minimum of 17, 18 points in the first and the second race, then I think that's what's going to cost them. But I don't see Renault in the next couple races really being, as quick as they were at the Nürburgring or as quick as they were in Mugello. They aren't going to be slow. They'll still be in the top 10, but it ain't going to be, 5th, 4th or 6th place. It's going to be more 8th, 9th, 10th. But again, they've got to try and soften that blow that's going to come in the next couple of races so they can really strike in Bahrain. Because if they do strike in Bahrain, and let's say the first Grand Prix there, they get 4th and 5th, and then the second race, they get a podium. Even though there's one race to go after that, that might just be enough for Renault to finish 3rd. So that's what they've got to do. That's how they've got to execute, really, the final 5 races of 2020. Before I go on to Racing Point, though, let me just quickly have a look at what you guys are saying about McLaren and Renault. We'll get onto, by the way, the Norris, the Norris Stroll incident. We'll get onto that in just a moment. The Iceman saying Lando dropped the C-bomb after the collision. I would have, because what Stroll did was... It was stupid, because what did Stroll expect Norris to do? Just disappear? You can't... If you're going to overtake from the outside into a corner that quick, you cannot turn in and try and clip the apex, because you will 100% have an accident. You've got to leave room. And almost, not pretend, because he was there, of course, Norris, but you've got to, when you go into that corner going around the outside, you've got to have Norris in mind as to where he is. And Norris was always going to be on the inside of the corner because he had every right to be there. But Stroll turned into the corner as if he overtook him before turn 1 when he didn't. They were side by side. It was very, very stupid. Thanks, Tonka, for that. Saying good to hear your voice again. Thank you very much. Quick look if there's any McLaren or Renault comments. I don't think there is in the chat. Crystal Racing saying McLaren and Racing Point have struggled a bit recently. Racing Point in the last couple races have looked a bit better. I'd say McLaren have probably been the ones struggling the most in terms of their actual point scoring. But yeah, McLaren, I said this a minute ago, they've rarely had the best midfield car at a particular weekend, but are still in that fight in 4th place, only 2 points behind. And I think that shows you how great McLaren as a team have been this season. Because really, if you judge it on pace, that fight should be between Racing Point and Renault, rather than Racing Point, Renault and McLaren. Because Racing Point and Renault have been, certainly in the last couple months, have been a bit quicker than McLaren most of the time. Right. Let's get on to Racing Point, as everyone in the chat is talking about. This certain driver on screen, Lance Stroll. Where should we start? Should we start with Stroll? So Perez, if you don't know, finished in 7th place, got driver of the day, the official driver of the day, even though I thought it was Lewis Hamilton. Perez got it. Perez, of course, was hit by Max Verstappen at the start. We'll get into that in a moment. But Lance Stroll, I know he's had a bit of a tough time recently because he was, of course, knocked out the Russian Grand Prix, didn't get any laps there, and was hurt by his team in qualifying for that Grand Prix as well because he broke down in the pit lane. Then he didn't race at the Nürburgring because he had COVID. And then this weekend was just very scrappy, having lap times deleted all the time, had a poor qualifying in 12th place when his teammate was in, was it 6th place for Perez? Or something like that, or 5th place? I can't remember exactly where. Yeah, poor qualifying for Stroll. And then in the race, the reason for me Stroll was so bad today is because he was on the optimum tyre for the Grand Prix. And you saw it in the first 10 to 15 laps. He was on this medium tyre that's on the car of Perez in this picture. Very quick, was overtaking Ricciardo and Raikkonen, looking to overtake Lando Norris. He was very, very quick. And I think Stroll today probably could have finished in 5th place. He was that quick. But, stupid move. And I'll show the picture now. you can't see really the point of contact, but you can see there Stroll crashing his car there. And he later retired apparently because of damage to his floor because of this incident. But basically what happened is, down into turn 1, Norris and Stroll side by side. Stroll very aggressively pulls to the outside and tries to go right around the outside, which, you can do. There's no problem with that. Problem is, you cannot turn into the apex like there's not a car there. Norris had every right to be there, and he was always going to be there because, Lando's a hard racer, a great racer, and knew his rights, I guess you could say, in terms of where he was allowed to be, what he was allowed to do. Norris did nothing wrong, defended his position very hard, and tried his best to make Lance Stroll work for it. And Stroll, just way too aggressive and very stupid. And he deserved what he got, which was a penalty, a damaged car, and then he got another penalty for continuously abusing track limits, which I have to say, it is so great to see that the FIA are finally coming down on drivers who just go, off the track a million times when there's that green AstroTurf at a certain Grand Prix. Great to see they're finally cracking down on it and saying, no, you've got to stay on the track. And the red and white curb, according to the FIA, defines the track, even though we all know it's actually the white lines define the racetrack. But, that's acceptable enough. But, yeah, just awful drive. And I know he's not had enough time in the car in the last month or so, and he's had COVID and all of that, but did not help himself today. Did not help himself at all, and didn't help his team. Because, with Perez coming back through the field, if Stroll had got past Norris, then got past the next car, which I think was Carlos Sainz, Stroll probably would have scored enough points for Racing Point to outscore McLaren and Renault today and pull out a further gap. But he did this. Very poor for him. We'll go back to Racing Point, or to, how they got on as a team. So that was Stroll. Now for Sergio Perez. Perez, at the start, he had a pretty good start. He got up to, was it 4th place? At the start of the Grand Prix. There you go. There is Perez now. Got up to 4th place and was going around the outside of Max Verstappen after Verstappen was pushed wide by Valtteri Bottas at turn 3. And then into that wonderful uphill left-hand turn 4, they made contact. And Perez was spun round, had to pit for the medium tyre, and went a super long way on that medium compound tyre. I'm surprised, to be honest, considering how long Ocon went on the medium. I'm surprised Perez didn't at least try to go to the end on this tyre, instead of, going onto the soft tyre that ended up costing him 5th place. But there you go. But great drive to come back through the field, overtaking so many cars. Great pace from the Racing Point, and at times he was actually quicker than Max Verstappen and Leclerc and Bottas and drivers like that. So another great performance by Perez. The I'd say 3rd great performance in a row from Perez. I think he's finished in the top. He didn't finish in the top 5 today. He was going to until the very end, but he finished in P7. But the Nürburgring, P4, finished in P4 as well in Russia. He's had a very good run in the last 2 or 3 races, and has yet again shown why he has to be on the grid in 2021. Sergio Perez is absolutely good enough to be in Formula 1. That's not even to be debated. And as I'll get onto later when I go through the driver standings, I think now he's in the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship. So surely there is no way a driver who is top 5 in the Drivers' Championship, he's not top 5 on the grid, we know that, but top 5 in the Drivers' Championships, surely a driver of, that quality is not going to end up off the grid, and I don't think he will. By the sounds of it, he's going to be at Williams for next season, but unfortunately, it looks as though Williams are going the money route. I'll get onto that a bit later when we get to Williams. But yeah, Perez deserves to be on the grid. He really, really does. He's a very, very good driver. He's definitely on a level with, your Valtteri Bottas's, your Ocons. He's better than Ocon. He's better than Stroll. He's better than Hulkenberg. He's better than Albon. He's a very good driver. He's got to be on the grid next season. No excuse whatsoever. We'll have a quick look at that crash. Is he on board from Max Verstappen? Now, you can't really see from this certain point, the contact point or whether Max was at fault or not. And I'll analyse this a bit further when I do my recorded review of this next week. But if you go back and look, Perez goes around the outside, which of course he has every right to do. Max has every right to fight it on the inside, but just understeers into him. And because that part of the track is very tight, the contact was inevitable. And I didn't think it was a penalty for Max. The contact, I didn't think what he did was worthy of a penalty. It was just a racing incident, in my opinion. And I'll showcase that later on in the week. I guess the only thing in hindsight that any driver here could have done to avoid the crash was Perez probably could have gone a bit wider to get past. But then would he have gone too wide and completed it off the track, the overtake? Who knows? That's why at the start of a Grand Prix, penalties don't really occur for start line or lap one crashes, because it's all very, everything that happens on the first lap is so quick, and you're reacting on your instincts rather than what you think is actually the best thing to do. It is hard to penalise drivers for first lap stuff, and I think this was just a classic first lap incident, so I don't think they should have punished Max at all for this. But yeah, there you go. That's Racing Point. With Perez, he recovered some very important points for them, but I think as a team in the race, Racing Point really did throw away a lot of points today. Perez probably should have scored 4 more points, and Stroll should have been up there as well, but he contributed to his own downfall. But let me have a quick look to see what you guys have to say about Racing Point. Mr. Racing says Grosjean got 5 seconds for track limits and Stroll got 10 for track limits. I don't think Stroll got 10 for track limits. He got 1 for the contact with Norris and 1 for the track limits. I don't think he got 10 for the track limits. I think it was only a 1 5-second one for that. Mr. Racing also saying that Stroll seems to have returned to his bad days of 2018 and some races from 2017-19. Yeah, I think, look, this weekend from Stroll, this isn't what he has normally been doing this season. It's not like, Alex Albon, where his poor performances have become the norm. This is not a normal Lance Stroll performance for 2020. Most of the time, Stroll's been pretty good and has definitely proved a lot of people wrong, including myself, who used to think quite lowly of him compared to the rest of the grid. I still don't think he is, say, top 10 on the grid in terms of drivers. I don't think he is as good as Sergio Perez, and this season does prove that. But he's not a bad driver. He's definitely worthy of being on the grid, and I think this season definitely proves that. But he still does have these weekends in him where he just can't really do anything right. Francisco says that he thinks the Stroll and Norris incident was a racing incident as well. I disagree. I mean, if Stroll had given him space and Lando had, turned into the apex and they just came together because there was a lack of space, then fine. But, when you've got one car on the inside at that corner and another car on the outside, and the car on the outside just comes right across, I think it's pretty clear who caused the accident. And Chris Redson saying, yeah, Stroll's had a decent season. Just this weekend has been awful. You know, Stroll, he'll be fine. I mean, next Grand Prix is Imola. He's raced there before, I believe, in F3. So he'll be fine. As long as, and I know it's only one practice session at that Grand Prix, which can be, very exciting. Make qualifying very exciting and the race as well. He should be fine. Just give him a couple races and he'll be back to, maybe not his best, but he'll be back scoring points, I think, for Racing Point. No pun intended. By the way, when it comes to next weekend and the content for next week, please make sure to stick around to the end of the stream because I have a very special announcement when it comes to that Grand Prix next weekend at Imola for the, was it the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix? I think that's what it's called. In my mind, it's the San Marino Grand Prix, but there you go. Anyway, let's move on from that. AlphaTauri, yeah, good day. Pierre Gasly, one of the drivers of the day, P5 in that car. You can't not say it was not a great drive. Just what an amazing performance. Especially as well that he started on the soft tyre, and that's what I don't understand about Gasly today. How was he so quick on that tyre when everyone else was so slow? I don't get it. Maybe that car's good on its tyres. Maybe Gasly's good on his tyres. I don't know. But he was so quick. So quick. I mean, he was going through the field as quickly as Charles Leclerc was on mediums. And that was understandable because Charles Leclerc was on mediums. But Gasly just, flew past Renault, of Ricciardo, then the McLarens. And I don't understand how he did it so easily and quickly. And he was so good today. Even when he passed Perez, even though he was on the soft tyre that wasn't good, his tyres were a lot fresher. But Gasly somehow still passed him for 5th place. And I have to say that move at the end with Perez's first defensive move was slightly naughty. It wasn't rule breaking. It was on the very limit, but if any more of what he did, Perez, and I think he would have probably got a penalty for that because he was pushing the limit of the rule book quite a bit in terms of defensive moving, but it was just about okay. But, great move at the end to pass Perez for P5, but how he was able to be that quick on soft tyres, I don't get it at all. Because everyone else on that tyre just fell off the cliff, except for him. Even Max Verstappen fell off the cliff. He didn't know. It's an amazing performance. That's all you can really say. Amazing performance again by Pierre Gasly, who is, without a doubt, one of the top 5 drivers of 2020. And then for Daniel Kvyat, even though Daniel finished dead last out of everyone who finished, I believe Daniel had a problem with his car. That's why he finished so far down. And really, his race was over after the start because he lost quite a few positions. Was stuck behind the Williams of Russell and Giovinazzi in the Alfa Romeo. And was just in traffic and then I think suffered some kind of problem. So that's why he ended up down in 19th place, I believe, at the end. But great result for Gasly. Just a shame that Charles Leclerc is so good that he's keeping Ferrari in 6th place because Ferrari don't deserve it. I think AlphaTauri honestly deserve that position more. Hopefully AlphaTauri keep on pressuring Ferrari for that position because I think they can still get it. But great drive by Gasly on those tyres. Just an amazing performance by him. And now let's go on to the final 3 teams. Alfa Romeo, Kimi Raikkonen today was incredible. That start, and there's already a clip of it on the Formula One website of his start where he gained 10 positions on the first lap. 10. That must be the most positions gained on a first lap for a long time. Or, quite close to the most positions gained on a first lap of all time. Incredible. Just incredible. And of course his soft tyres did help, but to have the the intelligence, the nous to just work your way through all the cars falling off the track and, swerving all over the place. to have that and to, get up to that position, it just shows why Kimi Räikkönen, as long as he wants to race, is still very much needed for Formula One, but also for Alfa Romeo as well. And for a long time was running in the points and actually finished in P11. And I think he could have, if he maybe didn't fall off the cliff on those soft tyres as quickly as he did, he might have been able to grab a point in the end off of Sebastian Vettel. There was actually a point towards the end where he was right behind Daniel Ricciardo for 9th place, with like 15 laps to go. So, yeah, great drive. And it looks as though that he's actually going to be on the grid for next season as well, which is good news. And then Antonio Giovinazzi, I don't think you can really say poor drive today, just not as good as his teammate. Yeah, Antonio did okay, nothing special, but I don't think he did bad today. Let's remember as well, the car isn't good. We know that. It's not a good car at all, and it does not deserve to be in the points on pure pace. I don't really think you can expect him or Kimi to be getting in the top 10, but a good race for Alfa Romeo. And it looks as though, according to Sky Sports, that Alfa Romeo's driver lineup for 2021 will be the exact same, Räikkönen and Giovinazzi. And you look at pure pace and performance, I think that's the right decision, because they've not been particularly bad, any of the drivers. I think Antonio Giovinazzi deserves another season, because I actually think he's been pretty good this season. But the problem is, the car is so poor, he can't showcase how good he really is. I think he's a lot better than that car is allowing him to do. I think he's had some very good races this season, but again, he's not being allowed to properly show it. Kimi, of course, is still good enough. And because the car has been bad this season, and the regulations for next season are basically the same, the only difference is they're going to start the season off with less aero than now, but it's basically the same. They may as well keep the same driver lineup to try and have that continuity from one year to the other and work through the problems of the car. I think that's the best way to go. And also, it looks as though for any Mick Schumacher fans out there that he will be on the grid instead in the Haas F1 car. And talking of Haas, well, there's nothing really to say, is there? Grosjean was shit. Magnussen was shit. Grosjean got a penalty. They're both out of F1. Not really sad for Grosjean, because he should have been out of Formula 1 probably at the end of 2018, to be honest. I feel sorry for Magnussen, though, because I think he is absolutely good enough to be in Formula 1. And I actually think he is secretly one of the, in terms of his pace in qualifying, I think the guy is right up there with a driver like Valtteri Bottas for speed in qualifying. He's very, very quick, and I think people have always underestimated him. But it looks as though he's out of Formula 1 as well. Instead, in that car for next season, it looks as though it's going to be Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin. Interesting lineup. I don't really have any expectations, though, for those two next season, because they're going to be in a really bad car. So you can't really expect them to be finishing the points, because, again, that car's bad. And Mick Schumacher, for example, if you look at every, say, formula he's been in, his first year is always quite underwhelming. And then in his second year, from then on, he tends to be very, very good. So, yeah, it's going to be a very tough next year or so for this team. And I got to say, if they don't get the new rules in 2022 right, then I don't really see a point in this team being on the grid anymore, because I don't see where they're going. They look completely hopeless with no direction whatsoever. And the last team is Williams, who, I mean, of course, they weren't quick this weekend. Who expected them to? They're Williams. Russell, I thought, drove very well today. There was a long stint in the Grand Prix where he was actually running in the points because he hadn't pitted yet. He was in one point. He was in P7 in the Williams, and he finished in 14th place. Very good drive. Very good drive, considering that car on a race day tends to be very poor. Latifi was 18th, I believe. Yeah, that's the best I think Williams could have done today. Now, with Williams, their driver lineup news is very, very interesting. So, this man on screen, Latifi, I think will be on the grid in this car next season, but it looks as though the other seat is a shootout between Russell and Perez, which in my opinion is a complete fucking disgrace because Russell is the best driver in this team. He should be in this car next season. And Perez, he should be in this car as well. And I don't see why they don't just go for Russell and Perez as a driver lineup because, yeah, you're not going to have as much money coming in from sponsorships if you go with Russell and Perez compared to Perez and Latifi. I get it. I absolutely get it. But if this Williams team wants to turn around and become a respectable, proper, we're trying to do good racing team, they will go with Russell and Perez. That's a very good driver lineup. You've got Russell, who is a potential, future world champion, and Sergio Perez, who has had many podiums in midfield cars and is very experienced. Next year, Perez would have been in the sport for 10 years. And look what he's done in 10 years. He's been great. Why not go for Russell and Perez? What a lineup that would be for Williams, who are still at the back. That would be a great lineup, and this team would probably move forward because of that lineup. And again, if you want to move forward in Formula One, yes, of course, if you're a smaller team, money is important, but you've got to have that quality to get you those great results to progress you up the field. Having Perez and Latifi as a lineup, compared to Russell and Perez, that's not going to do it. Russell and Perez as a lineup, if that is the lineup for next season at Williams, that would progress this team forward in 2021 and increase the chances quite a bit of Williams scoring a point and maybe finishing higher than last in the constructors. Sorry, last in the constructors. My throat is dying as it normally does. But it looks as though it's Perez and Latifi and the new owners of Williams, who of course they have no history in motorsport. They're what are they, a hedge fund in New York City? Such great racing heritage, of course. That is. It looks as though their plan for Williams is to operate as a cash cow rather than actually operate it as a proper racing outfit. So, if that turns out to be the case, that Russell is off the grid, then that is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace, because everyone on the grid and every Formula One fan and every person in that paddock would agree that Russell is definitely one of the 20 best drivers in the world and is absolutely good enough to be on that grid. Let's see what happens. That's the only thing I can say, really. Let's see what happens. I hope it's Russell and Perez, because that would be a really good lineup, and also be really good for Russell to finally test himself against a proper good teammate. Not a teammate who is, not what he was because of a disability. Let's be honest. With Kubica, that's the case. And Latifi, he's not as good as Russell. He isn't. He's not on the same level as Mr. Saturday, as they call him. Sergio Perez is a great benchmark to have for a young driver, because if you look at the drivers that Perez has, I think, proven to be better than, if Russell can just completely pound Perez into the dirt, then it will show that Russell is absolutely up there with your Charles Leclerc's, Carlos Sainz's, Sebastian Vettel's, Max Verstappen's possibly. It will show how good he is, because Perez, he's beaten some good drivers in his time. Kamui Kobayashi was a quick driver. Very erratic, of course, but he was quick. He beat Nico Hülkenberg, he beat Esteban Ocon, and he beat Lance Stroll. Now, I know those three are midfield drivers, Ocon, Hülkenberg, and Stroll, but if Russell was teammates with Perez and he destroyed Perez, it would show that Russell is the real deal. And it'd be great for Russell to, have a proper go against a properly good benchmark in Sergio Perez. But it looks as though that's not going to happen. And it's a fucking shame, honestly. Absolute shame. And if Williams are going to go with Perez and Latifi and go for the highest money available option, then they might as well just leave the sport. Because if that's what their, if their model from now on is gaining the most money and losing the least money they can, then you may as well just leave Formula One if that's their model. Because if you're not trying to improve and get closer to the front, which every team is, it may not seem it, but every team is trying to get closer to the front and improve. If you're not giving yourself the best chance possible, then you can't be took seriously. You can't. Right. Let's have a quick look at the chat before I get onto the standings, drivers and constructors. Is it Doralton Capital? Is that the owners of Williams now? Yeah, just, no racing heritage, and clearly they're just trying to get the most money out of this project as they can. Because, I mean, who doesn't think that Russell and Perez wouldn't be a good lineup? That'd be such a good lineup, especially in that midfield pack. And if Williams could improve the car by 2 or 3 tenths in that pecking order with that lineup, they might be able to finish, say, 8th or 9th in the constructors rather than last. But if you go with Perez and Latifi, I just don't see what that gains compared to Russell and Perez. I mean, yes, money, but... And yeah, money... In Formula 1, money is very, very important. Let's not deny that. But if you're not trying to win, you're never going to get anywhere. And of course, the teams are trying their best. But if you're not getting the best drivers you can't then complain about where you are in Formula 1. And I think if they were to go for Perez and Latifi, I think it would just be another example of the reason why this team has gone the way it has. Because this whole pay driver thing with Williams started with Pastor Maldonado. Then it went to Lance Stroll, who, let's be honest, when he came into Formula 1, he wasn't ready. He is ready now, and he's definitely good enough to be on the grid, but he wasn't ready when he came in, and that cost the team quite a lot. Sirotkin wasn't good enough to be in Formula 1. Kubica wasn't good enough to be in Formula 1, which is a shame because he was so good before his accident. And Latifi isn't good enough to be in Formula 1. But what's the common theme? They get in because of money. If Williams want to become, again, a respectable Formula 1 team that is trying their best to get up the grid and be back where they deserve to be, which I think they should be, Williams, a top 5 in the constructors team, given the current prize money structure we have in Formula 1. They should be finishing in the top 5 of the constructors at least every season. I don't think they have an excuse to be any lower than that, considering this is Williams. This isn't some tin pot team like Haas F1. And it's such a shame. Right, let me find one final comment when it comes to Williams. And we'll go to the end, basically the end of the stream. I'll read this final one out from Crystal Racing saying, at this point, Williams might as well become a Mercedes B team. They won't be Williams, but at least we have 10 teams. Sad, but that's F1. Well, that's what the new 2022 F1 rules are supposed to kind of get rid of, is teams reluctantly, like Alfa Romeo, becoming B teams because financially they can't compete any other way. That's the only hope for this team, is that that new era will give Williams a chance to not have to go this route. But, you know, it's such a shame. That's all you can say. It is such a shame. But that is it for the 2020 Portuguese Grand Prix and all the teams. I'll wait for the ticker to come back round to the drivers' standings so I can read out the final standings for the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors as well. And then after that, make sure to stick around just after that. So in a few minutes' time, we've got a big announcement to make as to content for next week on the channel, which I know you guys will be very excited about. But as you can see there, I'll read off some of the, I guess, key stats that I came up with after this race. Mercedes take their first win in Portugal as a constructor and an engine supplier. Of course, they never won here when it was at Estoril, the Grand Prix, with McLaren or Sauber. Lewis Hamilton, of course, now has the most race wins in Formula One history, 92. And he's definitely going to get 100 before he retires. That is without a doubt. And then Max Verstappen, just proving how he's dragged Red Bull to second in the Constructors. 9th podium of 2020. And that's the 10th podium for Red Bull in 2020. And then another, I guess, maybe not important to today, but interesting stat is this is the first Portuguese Grand Prix without a Renault-powered car on the podium since 1990. 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, and 96. Renault-powered teams not only were on the podium, they won the race. Of course, the Williams. I think the drivers at those times were Patrese, Mansell, Alain Prost, Damon Hill, David Coulthard, and Jacques Villeneuve. Anyway, these are the drivers' standings. Lewis Hamilton leading by quite a distance now. He's going to wrap up the Drivers' Championship very soon. Valtteri Bottas second, just ahead of Max Verstappen, who's third. Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc joint fourth, I guess. Sergio Perez sixth. Lando Norris in seventh. Albon eighth. Gasly ninth. Sainz in 10th. Lance Stroll is P11. Then Ocon 12th. Vettel 13th. Just showing how bad of a season it's been. Kvyat 14th. Hulkenberg 15th, even though he's only done, 2 races, really. He never did the first Silverstone race. 16th is Antonio Giovinazzi. 17th, Raikkonen. 18th, Grosjean. 19th, Magnussen. And then 20th and 21st, Latifi and Russell. But the biggest fight, I think, of this season, the most interesting one, comes in the constructor standings. So Mercedes leading that. They haven't wrapped up the constructors, I don't think, as of yet, but they will do in Imola. Red Bull second. Racing Point third on 126 points. Only 2 points ahead of McLaren, who are on 124. Renault on 120. 6 points behind Racing Point in third. Renault, of course, in fifth. McLaren fourth. Ferrari sixth on 93 points. AlphaTauri seventh on 77. Alfa Romeo 8th on 5 points. Haas 9th on 3 points. And Williams last on 0 points. I will, when I do another stream again, I will have a better illustration of the driver and constructors standings. For the next stream on. I'm creating I wouldn't say a new graphic, but it'll be a graphic that I can show on screen that will better show people who aren't able to read that bottom ticker as well, if you're on the mobile or something like that. But there you go. Those are your standings. Now, before I come off, let me just throw this back up. Pictures of the Mercedes. Let me get into the content coming up on the channel next week. So, on Friday, either Thursday or Friday, but most likely Friday, I will have a recorded review of the Portuguese Grand Prix out on the channel. I did a recorded review of the Eiffel Grand Prix that came out 2 days ago. If you haven't seen it, make sure to do so. And yeah, that was my first recorded video, by the way, since February. That just shows you how long of a year it's been. Yeah, I'll have a recorded review of this Grand Prix out on Friday, and I'll better illustrate the incidents of Verstappen and Perez and Stroll and Norris and all of that, and just a summary, an entertaining summary, I hope, what happened this weekend. And then, the Imola Grand Prix weekend, I will be increasing the content quite a lot. So, the watch-alongs that I know you guys enjoy the most from this channel, and I do as well, or I did do in the past, I enjoy the most, they are coming back next weekend. Not for the whole weekend, only for next Saturday. This is the plan. So, next Saturday, of course, there's no Friday practice for next weekend. It's only a 2-day weekend. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll be live for the only practice session in the morning, which I think is 9 a.m. UK time. And then I'll be live for qualifying as well. I won't be live for the race, and I will not be doing a race watch-along. The reason I'm only doing a watch-along for practice, I guess you can call it practice 1 and then qualifying, is because I'm using those 2 watch-alongs as a test to see whether I want to do watch-alongs again, because of course I haven't done it in a while and I might not enjoy it again. And the way my year's been, as you guys will know if you watch those very depressing videos of mine around March, I've had a very tough year. So when it comes to watch-alongs, I need to work out whether I do want to do them again and whether I can enjoy them and enjoy doing it again. So those streams will serve as a test, and also a test as to whether you guys are still keen on seeing that content from me, you know, going forward. And if all goes well, then I'll bring the watch-alongs back again later on in the season, probably for the Bahrain races. That's not guaranteed, but if I do bring it back, then it'll be for those races. But yeah, this, I guess this Saturday coming, watch along for practice 1 at Imola, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And then for qualifying as well, which is 1 p.m. UK time to 2 p.m. UK time here on the channel. So don't forget to subscribe for that, coming up on Saturday. And then, yeah, I won't do a race watch along, but I will be doing a race reaction at, what, an hour after the race finishes. So 3 p.m. UK time, I think, because the race starts at 12. So, yeah, that's the plan for next week. 3 streams and 1 recorded video. Hope you guys are excited as I am for that content coming back for the channel. And then after that, you know, if the watch-alongs go well, also the watch-alongs are to serve as a test also for new graphics I have or had at the start of this season that I was using for the the pre-season testing watch-alongs. I was using it for that. I'm also wanting to test those out again to make sure those are the best they can be, and to see if there's anything further I can do with those graphics. So yeah, that's the plan for next week. And after that, there should be then a couple recorded videos in the couple weeks after that, and then when it comes to more streams or watch-alongs, we'll see based on what happens next weekend. But there you go, watch-alongs are coming back, and I cannot wait to do it again. Hopefully I'll see all of you there, plus a lot more for those streams. But guys, thank you very much for coming to this stream, and thank you very much for liking it if you have. If you haven't, make sure to do so. And anyone who has subscribed to the channel, thank you very much for still sticking around. And if you haven't subscribed, then make sure to do so down below. Also, don't forget to post a comment about what you thought of the Grand Prix and your reaction to the Grand Prix as a whole. And as well, check out my previous videos, the Eiffel Grand Prix review on the channel. You can go and watch that. Not very long, it's only about 8.5 minutes. And then, yeah, I'll see you probably on Friday for the review of this Grand Prix. And then on Saturday, I'll be live from 9 till 10:30. And then again from 12:30, which is, half an hour before qualifying. And then until, say, half an hour after qualifying. So I'll be live for quite a long time next Saturday. So it'll be great to see you all there. And then, of course, the race reaction on the Sunday as well. If you want to contact me, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. And also, my email is there as well. If you want to send me an email asking me something, then you can send an email to that address. And there you go. I'll see you guys for the next recorded video on Friday. And for the next stream, the return of the watch-alongs, I'll see you next Saturday morning, bright and early, for the return of Formula 1 at Imola.